Today's discussion topic comes from a write-in question on Instagram, so I'd like to take just a quick second to thank those of you that took the time to write in potential discussion topics on my Instagram page. I really enjoy making these episodes, and I love sharing my views and opinions and experience, but it makes it so much more enjoyable when I know it's information that you guys actually want to learn about, and it's not just something that I want you to learn about. So, the question we're talking about today is, how do you periodize a training program for the entire Supercross and Motocross season? Let's go. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Panisi, and today we're talking about periodizing a training program for the entire Supercross and Motocross season. So I want to start by saying that this topic is kind of a beast, so I plan to break it up into two parts to make sure that I'm not completely overloading you with information. Part one, we're going to take a deep dive into what periodization is. And part two, we'll talk specifically about how we can apply it to the motocross and supercross season. Most athletes and coaches will listen to this podcast and hope that I'll lay out a blueprint for training that you can just copy and paste and be in the best shape of your life. But it doesn't really work like that. All right, so my goal with this episode is to help you understand the thought process involved and hopefully get across the idea that the best program is never linear. All right, everything needs to be individualized and changed based on need. The best programs are written in pencil, not pen. So most of what we talk about today is geared towards the strength training side of the program, but pretty much all of what we talk about directly applies to cardio, on-the-bike training, etc. These are principles that can be applied to training as a whole, not just for weightlifting. I really feel like I need to open this episode by saying that these are my views on periodization for professional riders. If you're a strength coach or a pro rider, this information is appropriate for you. If you're an amateur athlete training for Loretta Lynn's, this isn't really meant for you. I'll make another episode specifically for the amateur season training around Mini-O's, Spring Nationals, and Loretta's. All right. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think you should listen to this podcast, because I know a lot of amateurs that find enjoyment from learning what the pros are doing, as long as they understand it's not what they're supposed to be doing right now. As an amateur, your needs for training are different. And if you ask any pro, they weren't doing this type of training when they were an amateur. They've had years and years to develop their abilities, and consequently, their program has evolved as well. This is actually a real issue in all sports, especially with social media being the way that it is right now. They see what the pros are doing for training, and they think, well, gee, that's what I should be doing to get ahead or to get to that next level, but that's just a rookie mistake. All right, don't do it. You'll end up injured, burned out, or both. All that being said, let's move on. So before we can talk about periodization for motocross, we first have to talk about what periodization is. Periodization is simply planning your training into manageable phases based on the desired adaptation and competition timing. It's making a plan to be sure that you're fit at the right times and in the right ways. This will consist of macrocycles, mesocycles, and microcycles. All right, but really, I don't want you to get too caught up in those terms right now. I'd rather we kind of stay big picture. So I prefer to use terms like preseason, in-season, off-season, and then I'll talk about specific training blocks within those time periods. So what we know about periodization for sport is that the body likes to follow a certain progression of training in order to achieve peak condition. That progression is broken down into 5 distinct phases. I'll break those down for you right now. Phase 1, anatomical adaptation. This phase is where we build the physiological foundation of an athlete. Another term for this phase is GPP, or general physical preparation. This phase is meant to ease the athlete into strength training, preparing the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and the cardiovascular system for more intense training down the road. This is also our chance to tackle any obvious deficiencies that may exist. We generally accomplish this phase of training through circuit training. All right, the reason being is we like to keep overall training intensity low, which means low weight, low resistance, and the volume relatively high, which is your number of exercises, the number of reps per exercise, and then the number of laps in the circuit. Typically, we'll see something like 6 to 10 exercises, each performing 15 to 20 reps for 2 to 5 laps. All right. This gives the athlete lots of reps with light weights, giving them the chance to improve exercise technique and body control within a safe environment. It also gives them a base level of endurance. This phase can last anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks, depending on the athlete's needs, but it is absolutely crucial to give an adequate chunk of time. All right. In almost any instance where someone suffers an injury while training, it's because the anatomical adaptation phase was either too short or non-existent. All right. That brings us to phase 2, hypertrophy. This is kind of a touchy phase within the motocross community, and if you haven't already, listen to my podcast about strength training for motocross and then pick back up right here. I think that will lay to rest a lot of skepticism. For those who haven't listened, I basically go on to break down how lifting weights won't inherently cause more arm pump or worse arm pump, and it should absolutely be a staple of your supercross and motocross training program. So the hypertrophy phase will see a slight decrease in training volume at the beginning, but a moderate increase in training intensity. This would be something like performing 8 to 12 reps for anywhere from 3 to 5 sets. All right, as you become more comfortable with this training intensity, you can then start to increase the volume slightly to be sure that you're seeing the growth that you're after. The sole purpose of this phase is to increase sport-specific muscle mass. All right, the goal of this phase is not to get so huge that you can't even touch your own back. The goal is to see modest growth in functional lean body mass only in the muscle groups most utilized in motocross. Even if you're not really looking to gain muscle mass, it's still important to include this phase because it's the next step in intensity and volume before we get to the real strength gains coming soon. It's important to give your body a chance to experience the gradual progression in overall training load. You can be sure that you're not gaining size on accident by keeping your diet in check and only perform the volume that's necessary to see slight increases in strength. So that would be more towards like the 3 to 4 sets per exercise. All right, that brings us to phase 3, max strength. By this phase, our body has had the chance to strengthen our ligaments and tendons, and our body is a little more used to lifting heavy loads, and we have most of the muscle mass we're going to need for the next few months. So, the sole purpose of this training phase is to increase sport-specific strength. Not size, strength. All right? We are no longer looking to increase size, so our volume is lower and our intensity is higher. This could look like performing 3 to 6 reps for 3 to 5 sets. All right, that's considerably less volume, but we're talking heavy weight. For this phase, you should focus on full body combination exercises. And if there's any accessory work that you need to add in to address deficiencies or what have you, I don't recommend doing the 3 to 6 rep range heavy. All right, accessory work can stay along the lines of like the 8 to 12 rep range, 3 to 4 sets. That heavy of a load just isn't really necessary for most accessory exercises, especially if the goal is maintaining good form. All right, that brings us to phase 4, transitioning to sport-specific needs. All right, the fourth phase is aimed at taking all that hard work, all that progress you've made, and now focusing it to what you specifically need to be successful in your sport. So when we talk about motocross, it doesn't really do us a lot of good to be able to squat 500 pounds 2 to 3 times, take a long break for like 5-10 minutes, and then do that one more time before we call it a day, right? Motocross is the perfect blend of endurance, strength, power. Now that we've taken the time to get our full body strength to all-time highs, it's time for us to transition to being endurance machines. Our rep ranges change now to maybe 3 sets of 15 to 20 reps, minimal rest in between. I'm talking like 15 to 30 seconds, and this is with moderate weight. If you run any of the same circuits you ran during the anatomical adaptation phase, the weights you're able to move for 15 to 20 reps should be considerably higher. We need to be able to produce as much force as possible, as many times as possible before we reach fatigue. That's what will separate the guy who can run a 30 plus 2 with little to no lap time fall off and the guy who's good for a 15-minute sprint effort and then they're done, absolutely smoked. That brings us to phase 5, the fifth and final phase, maintenance. All right, and this phase is exactly how it sounds. The sole purpose is to maintain the levels of strength and endurance you've worked so hard to achieve. By this point, you're in the competitive season, and it can be tempting to cut out weight training for fear of overtraining or accumulating too much fatigue. However, maintaining strength and endurance is much simpler than building it from nothing. Much simpler and much easier. Strength maintenance workouts must be incorporated into the weekly in-season training. Otherwise, your strength and endurance will slowly begin to wither away. So you can see that this linear model of periodization showcases an inverse relationship between volume and intensity. At the start of the program, your volume is high while the intensity is low, and then by the time you hit maintenance, intensity is high and overall volume is low, meaning your workout should be as short and efficient as possible to leave you all the energy you'll need for on-the-track training. All right, let's do a quick recap. 5 phases of periodization. Phase 1, anatomical adaptation. This is where we lay the foundation and address deficiencies that may exist with the athlete. Phase number 2, hypertrophy. This is where we build sport-specific muscle mass and give the body a chance to adjust to heavier loads. Phase number 3, maximum strength, where our only goal is to increase strength by reducing volume and upping the intensity or the weight lifted. Phase 4, transitioning to sport-specific needs. Now is the time to take that newly built strength and learn how to utilize it as an endurance machine. And last but not least, maintenance. A crucial part of the program, often overlooked, but without it, all the progress you made will slowly wither away. Alright guys, that'll do it for part 1 of periodization for motocross. Before you move on to part 2, I'd highly recommend giving yourself some time to digest the information. It took me a long time to connect all the dots the first time around, and it's a lot of information about a very complicated subject. Alright, so give yourself some time. Also, I just want to thank you guys so much for listening and supporting the podcast. If you found anything I said today helpful, or you just like hearing me talk about things related to motocross training, please take 30 seconds, leave a quick review, share this podcast with one person who you think would enjoy it. I'm doing my best to help elevate the sport of motocross, and together with your support, I really believe we can change the sport for the better and help the world realize just how elite motocross is. See you guys next time.